When you go to emulate your favorite players, you quite often come up against a brick wall, right? You know, your favorite players play with that singing vocal quality and the saxophone just seems to soar and it just gets you right in here. But then when you play exactly the same notes, it can sound mechanical or wooden or expressionless or just, kind of flatland. So what is going on here? That is what I'm going to explain to you in today's video. To do that, I'm going to have a little classroom session here and I'm going to explain to you why the best players have got a very wide range of expression and they've got a lot of nuance and subtlety in their playing, which comes from a wide variety of sources. So don't beat yourself up if you don't sound like your favorite players. There's some very good reasons for it, and that is exactly what we're going to explore today. Now, the important thing to remember here is that if you're trying to emulate those really expressionful, is that even a word? Expressionful techniques, but you haven't got the basics in place, you're going to sound a little bit dodgy and a little bit beginnerish, okay? So let's make sure that you get the basics in place first, and then I'll show you all the different colors that you can create on your saxophone. It's a bit like when you're doing a painting. Now, if I'm going to do a painting of a person, it's probably, going to look like this because I'm the world's most awful artist. I'm great with my saxophone, but I cannot do visual art. However, the best players have got that range of expression, and that's what we're going to look into today. It's like being an artist and having infinite colours that you can create a beautiful tapestry with, as opposed to just having one charcoal and some basic some basic shapes to work with, which is what I've got when it comes to visual art. So let's go through the different variations and how you create them. Make sure that you got the basics right, and then I'll show you how those things work together to create that depth of expression and let you be able to paint your oil painting like a masterpiece instead of a stick drawing. Okay, the first thing that we're going to look at is your embouchure and voicing. Now, I'm going to clump these together under one roof, okay? We've got embouchure and voicing. Now, your voicing is how you arrange your vocal tract, your mouth, your throat, all that kind of stuff. Now, these two things are going to work together. So what are the most basic things that you need? First of all, you need to be able to play with an embouchure that is not too tight so that you're not choking the sound. So if you're playing your saxophone and it sounds like this, you're biting too hard and you're not doing yourself any favors. You need to have a nice, loose, relaxed embouchure, and I have covered that in many videos. Go and look them up. Okay, my embouchure is nice and loose. I'm not biting on the reed. I haven't included breathing in here, but that is fundamental to all this stuff, so make sure you check out my video on breathing as well. Now, once you've got a basic embouchure that works and a voicing that is at least fairly stable, there are lots of variations that you can employ. So what are the sort of things you can do? Well, you can use tone variation, okay? My handwriting is terrible, but who cares? We're all friends. Now, by tone variation, I mean that you can vary like an EQ. You can vary what your saxophone sounds like. So using your embouchure and voicing, you can play very dark. And hopefully you don't split notes. Or you can brighten up that sound. Now you should be able to, in the course of one note, go wow, wow. It kind of works better on low notes. And you can probably see my jaw moving. That's because everything is changing inside my oral cavity and I can make the sound brighter or darker. So that is tone variation, very important. The other thing that you can do is subtone. Subtone is when you get that nice whiffly sound down the bottom of the instrument. Subtone is very different from playing normal tone, low down, quietly. So here's normal tone quietly. And here's subtone. And I've got a video in subtone. You can look up all these videos for yourself. Okay, the next thing that you can do with your embouchure and your voicing is intonation. Now, there's two sides to this equation. First of all, you want to make sure that you're playing nicely in tune, because there are certain notes on the instrument you're going to have to flatten. And hopefully you've kind of pushed your mouthpiece on, so it's mainly the sharp notes that you have to flatten rather than the flat notes you have to raise, because that is... number one, it's much more difficult, and number two, quite often compromises your tone. But make sure that you're playing in tune, okay? Then you can introduce variations in pitch, like bends and scoops, which are going to bring that vocal quality to your performance, okay? So here is just a normal note. Now, using your voicing and... well, you know, there's many different ways of skinning a cat, sorry to use that expression, when it comes to bending notes. But just using your embouchure voicing, you can bend the pitch down. And depending which note you're playing, you can use different amounts of pitch bend. For example, the palm key notes you can bend a lot. The very low notes you can hardly bend at all. That's the physics. Embouchure and voicing can help you control the bends and scoops, and that is going to add that different subtlety and layer to your sound when you come to perform your songs, and it's going to make you sound more pro and more expressionful. I like the word expressionful. I'm going to keep using it. All right, let's now move on to the second thing. We'll call embouchure and voicing number one. I forgot to write the number on there. Right, number two is going to be articulation. This is very important, vital. I can't write and talk at the same time. I can't even write. Okay. The most basic thing that you need to get right about articulation is to have a nice, clean, crisp attack to every note. A nice cha. If your note attacks, if your basic articulation is, well, I call it kind of mumpy or, you know, boom, boom. And if it's not clean, if you're bending the pitch and doing the dreaded bows, that is the first thing you need to address, and it's going to infinitely improve your playing. It's like I said at the intro, if you get the basics right, then you can build layers of subtlety and variation on that. But if you're trying to achieve the subtlety and your basics aren't right, it will not work. So when it comes to articulation, you want a nice, crispy, clean attack to the notes. Make sure that your attack isn't mumpy and humpy and fuzzy and scoopy and bendy and wowy and out of focus. Anything like that is going to have to go out the door. You're going to have to get my Phrase Like a Pro course and learn how to tongue properly. So that is the basic variation of what you're looking to do with articulation. Clean, crisp attack at the beginning of the notes. Now, if you only did that, you would already be well ahead of the game. But what else can you do with articulation? What colors can you add to your palette? Well, you can do different variations of articulation. You can either tongue with the very tip, and that will give you a nice clean, crisp attack, or you can use a little bit more tongue and give yourself a more fuzzy, poppy, sucky type attack. So I'll show you what I mean. If you use the very tip of your tongue, very precise, clean, crisp articulation. Now, if you use a bit more tongue, like just back from the tip of your tongue, you can add a little bit more of a kind of hazy, fuzzy attack. A little bit sucky even. Can you hear it? So when you use the sort of fatter amount of tongue on the reed, you can vary the articulation. Now that is another little shade in your palette of colours that you can use when you're painting your song. Right, what else can you do? Here's a good one. You can do half-tonguing. Now half-tonguing is really important when you start playing jazz and funk and all those kind of things. go and watch my half-tonguing video. But basically, it'll let you do things like this. It's where you lay your tongue flat on the reed and then you pull it off, and the sound still comes out, but it's more muffled. So when you're playing jazz, this is very important, of course. There's lots of rules about when it happens and when it doesn't. You have to go and watch my Phrase Like a Pro course. But this is something that is ubiquitous in all pop, funk and jazz playing. And if you don't start looking at it now, you won't have that extra layer, that extra colour on your palette when you're painting your song. So, half-tonguing, super important. What else can we do with articulation? Well, if you can tongue fast enough, then that gives you the ability to add extra speed, and you can even consider learning how to do double tonguing. So when you can tongue fast, you could do things like, you know, you can add that extra attack. So if you're playing a fast tempo, whereas if you've got mumpy, humpy, slurry tonguing, you're not going to be able to do that. Double tonguing is something I actually can't really do. That is one of the little shades which is missing from my colour palette, but I know how you do it. I can kind of approximate it. It's not bad actually, considering I can't do it. And you can even do triple tonguing, but that's another thing altogether. Talking of articulation, if you take somebody like Derek Brown and his beatbox sax, that is taking your available variation of colours in your playing to the absolute extreme. I mean, he's got sounds which you can hardly even imagine. You know, another thing which you can put down here under articulation is slap tonguing, which is another thing which I have not really got in my available range of colours at this point. But I'm going to work on that at some point, and it just goes to show how fun saxophone is. You never stop learning. Right, so that is articulation. Get the basics in place, and then you've got all these subtleties and variations that you can use, which are going to bring that vocal element to your playing. So before we go on to the next point, why not go and check out my free Saxophone Success Masterclass? It's a whole hour of awesome teaching to really level up your skills in saxophone and help you sound better and help you get to that point that we're talking about today, where you can express how you want to play your songs and really make your saxophone sing. It's completely free. You just fill in your email. The link is in the description, or you can see it on screen there. And now let's get back to today's discussion about the range of colours that you've got available when you play saxophone. Okay, what's next up then? Next up is vibrato. Let's look at number 3, which is vibrato. Now that is really where you start bringing that vocal singing quality to your performances. If you're attempting vibrato and you don't know what you're doing, and it sounds a bit like a bleating goat, no offense to goats, or maybe a bleating sheep, then you are better off doing no vibrato. So there's the take home there. If you want to play at a basic level and get the foundations in place first, and your vibrato is dodgy, don't use any vibrato. Most of these bad habits that people have are habitual. They don't even know they're doing it, which is why in Phrase Like a Pro, I teach you to wipe the slate clean first of all. Okay, now, what can you do with your vibrato once you've got it in place and you know what you're doing? Well, you can control the variables, okay? So, what are the variables? Well, the variables are how fast your vibrato is, how deep your vibrato is, and when you introduce your vibrato. And then another thing that you can bring in is terminal vibrato. Terminal vibrato is when you do a big wodge of vibrato at the end of the note. Okay, and that's a kind of different type of vibrato altogether. Look at my scuffy handwriting. Right. So here are some variables with your vibrato. And by the way, vibrato defines genre. So if you wanted to sound like a 1940s, dance band, you would use this kind of vibrato. And the whole sax section would do that together and you'd sound awesome. But you wouldn't do that if you want to sound like a modern jazz player and you're playing a ballad or a pop player. So the depth and the speed of the vibrato defines the genre which you want to perform in. Let's talk about terminal vibrato as well. Terminal vibrato is where you go and you do 2 or 3 big wobbles at the end and then kiss off the note with a bit of air. That's kind of what it sounds like. So it's important to learn that. That is another colour which you can employ when you're performing. Right, that's vibrato. Very important. Because vibrato makes your saxophone sound like a human voice. And that is what this is all about, sounding like a human voice. Right, next up, we've got your basic technique. Now, why is this important? Well, you're about to find out why it's important. At a very basic level, you want to be practicing your scales, have a good, finger position, no beaver paws, no tower bridges, all that stuff. And you want to be nice and loosey-goosey and relaxed. That's the basic level on this, okay? Once you've got that in place, your technique will allow you to bring a few different things to the table in terms of your expression. Like I keep saying, it's all about having more subtlety, more range of colours that you can create when you play your songs. Right, so what are those range of colours that will that your technique will help you with? Okay, first of all, you can do turns. And you need to have a good technique to be able to play fast turns. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. You can do grace notes as well. Grace notes are very important in things like smooth jazz and funk and basically jazz. They're very important across the board. Right, you can also do rips. That's when you rip up to a note. Falls when you fall off a note. And glissandos. Glissando, or glissandi, I think is the official title, where you rapidly use the chromatic scale or other scales to glide between notes. Portamento is when you do it smoothly. Glissandi is when you can actually, there's individual notes. You're not making it go. You kind of go. You can hear the little individual notes. And as usual, I've got a video on that. And also, if you've got good enough technique, you can use alternative fingerings, which are going to give you a good variation of tone. One thing that I should add to your embouchure and voicing, by the way, is non-fingered falls up here. You can do fall-offs using your embouchure and voicing. So a fall-off using your embouchure and voicing sounds like this. And it's very useful. A fall-off using a glissando sounds like this. You actually finger notes. So that comes under technique. So when you've got the technique, you can use turns like this. Things like that. That is using turns. Grace notes, of course. Now, here's an important thing to remember about using grace notes. If you can't do things like bends and scoops very well, what you should do is do grace notes instead, because a badly performed scoop or bend is going to kill your sound. However, a grace note will always sound pretty good in its place. So there you go. There's a little top tip for you. So that's grace notes. Now, rips are when you rapidly rip up to a note. A little bit of terminal vibrato as well. Falls, like I just said, are when you fall off a note. Glissandi are when you glide between notes. Okay, so that's really useful because when people are singing a song, they go, they kind of scoop down, and that's what the saxophone sounds like when you do it. Alrighty, let's move on. There are 2 more to cover, and I'm not sure if I'm going to have space here. So the next little variation which you can add is growling. And there are a couple of different types of methods for growling. The most common one is humming a note in your throat whilst you play. The other one is rolling your tongue in the top of your mouth. So the humming method sounds like this. And the tongue roll. Now, when you do the tongue roll, you can't articulate because your tongue is buzzing away in the top of your mouth. There's a fun fact. So that's the two different ways of growling. Now, you can combine these to create infinite levels and variations of what your growl sounds like. Especially in the altissimo register, you can really vary what you want your high notes to sound like. So, for example, somebody like Lenny Pickett doesn't use much in the way of growl on the high notes. They're very pure. So Lenny Pickett might do something like... you know, just pure tone. Whereas somebody like Joe Lovano or many other players, Kenny Garrett, they use a lot of growl on those high notes. So you can vary how you express your notes using growl. You can bring in a little growl, you can use a lot of growl. It's up to you. All those colors are available to you once you've mastered the art of growling. So you've got different types of growling, and you've got different variations of how you apply them. My writing is getting worse and worse. All right, finally, this little lecture session on how to broaden out your expression on saxophone. Let's talk about dynamics, okay? So number 6 is dynamics, which is, of course, how quietly or loudly you play. Now, under dynamics, you've got micro dynamics and you've got macro dynamics. Macro dynamics is like the broad strokes of how loud or quiet something is. That'll be what you kind of generally define as dynamic markings, piano, forte, crescendo, all that stuff. But microdynamics are when you subtly vary, even within one line, how loud or quiet different notes are. You bring out different notes, and this is very important for jazz phrasing. It's very important for all phrasing, even classical phrasing. So whenever you play lines when you're performing your favorite song, you should always be bringing light and shade on a small level and on a bigger level. So let's just I'm just going to play a line with no dynamics, okay? I don't remember what it was to play it again, but now I'm going to do it with those micro dynamics where you bring out different notes. And it gives it that aliveness, that kind of human quality to it. And actually, if you can master your half-tonguing, if I could find it in here, if you can master your half-tonguing, that is a great way of bringing light and shade to your performance. Alrighty, so there's lots of different colours that you've got available when you perform your songs. So if I just play one phrase, I can show you that all these things are going to start working together. So if I just go back to a blues phrase that I played earlier, because as I was playing it, I was thinking, this is a great example. So let's just do this. Here we go. Okay, so what's going on there? We've got tonguing. We've got half tonguing. That's the half tonguing. We've got grace notes. I've got a little grace note in there. We've got little... what else have we got? You've got the growl, okay? We've got the light and shade in the dynamics in the line. That was a bit of terminal vibrato. Then you've got a fall off with the growl. There was another grace note in there, combined with a note scoop, and then there's vibrato layered on top of that. You see how much expression there is in one little piece of music. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just play, I don't know, let me play Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone, because everyone loves to play that song. And you can hear So many of the techniques that you can hear over there, you can hear it in the way I perform the music. Here we go. So let's have a little look at the list and see what was on there. There was tonal variation. Some notes were brighter, darker, and I went down low, and there was subtone. There was different intonation and pitch bends and scoops and a fall off. So that was everything in number 1 covered there. There were variations in tonguing. Some notes were punchy, others were smooth. There was half tonguing. There wasn't double tonguing or particularly fast tonguing there. There was nice vibrato with the kind of deep, slow vibrato, which is appropriate to that genre. There was probably a bit of terminal vibrato, I can't remember. There were turns, putting turns in there. There were lots of grace notes. There were, I don't think there were any rips, but there were falls. I can't remember if they were glissandi, maybe. Can't remember if I did alternate fingerings, possibly. There was definitely growl. And there was lots of macro and micro expressions in the dynamics. So just in that one little performance. Now, if I do the same thing again, this time I'm going to do it with basic techniques, which are solid. So you can hear that it still sounds good. It just doesn't have those extra depths of expression, if you like. Here we go. That doesn't sound bad compared to how most people play it with lots of habitual stuff going on. That doesn't sound bad. So that is the moral story. So to recap everything that we've learned about today, the moral of the story is this. Make sure that you've got the very basics in place first. Solid sound, solid articulation with no variations or messy mumpiness when you hit each note. Either a kind of useful basic vibrato or no vibrato, if you can't do that. And some basic technique. Now, once you can do that and you follow the articulation of songs carefully, you can sound quite good. Then, to take what you've got and expand those depth of colours and to play with so much more resolution, you can add in all the things that we've learned about today. And it's a long process, so you just got to stick with it, okay? It's not going to happen overnight, believe me. Everyone says saxophone is easy to play, and it kind of, I don't know, it's easy to maybe to make a noise, but it's not easy to master. That's what I'm here to help you with. Now, if you get my Total Tone Mastery course and my Phrase Like a Pro course, they go in a very exhaustive detail, but step by step through this whole process. I'll put a link in the description for both those courses. Like I mentioned earlier, go and check out my free Saxophone Success Masterclass. Hope you enjoyed that. That's my free gift to you. Loads of great advice in there. If you're not subscribed to the channel, it would be awesome if you would subscribe because that's really going to help bring this message to more people. And until next week, where I'll be saxing up your Sunday as usual, make sure that you practice hard, practice smart, and enjoy your music. Take it easy. I'm going to flip and put this. They've got that singing vocal quality to. So Lenny Pickett might do something like not that.